course, in the chaos. This is a special bonus episode, part 1 of 2, on the subject of Thanksgiving. We are in Thanksgiving week right now. If there were more Thanksgiving-style songs, we would probably hit you with that in the background, make it more festive. But alas, really an untapped market, I think. Thanksgiving songs, Jack. You might want to start working on that.
I know one Thanksgiving song.
Is it? I mean, the only ones I can think of are like hymns, which I guess is the most appropriate.
No. So
Thanksgiving.
You should listen to this song. It's by Andrew Peterson, called "Don't You Want to Thank Someone?" And that's not a joke. Sometimes I would make a joke here.
Yeah. Right.
This is
people are running and searching.
Yeah, they're like, I'm not listening to that. No, it's a good
Jack,
song.
If there's one thing I know about Jack, he never jokes about Andrew Peterson.
That is true.
So
that is true.
Well, this is, again, kind of a two-part bonus episode. And what we'd really like to look at, our mission and goal here, is to kind of whet your appetites on some things with Christian history. A lot of people know bits and pieces of the story of the Pilgrims, or maybe you're well-read and this will be extremely boring to you. But a lot of folks don't know the events that led up to the Pilgrims deciding that they needed to leave England and eventually flee Holland and come over to the New World. The events that led up to it, the events that transpired dear in all of their decision-making and things like that. We would just really like to kind of do what do they, I don't fly enough. What's the terminology, Jack? Is it 50,000 foot flyover? Is that
30.
50,000's way up there.
You're up there.
Right. 30,000 foot flyover. And so again, this is for those of you who are history buffs and things like that, I want to kind of just give you a heads up. I mean, this is going to be so fast. There's so many things that we won't even be able to cover. But again, we're kind of just taking a speedboat through time and looking at these events that led up to what we know as Thanksgiving. So with all that being said, Jack, do you have any additional thoughts?
No, just I'm going to give the listeners a warning. I kind of inserted myself into the podcast a few minutes before this began. Blake did all the preparation work, and I'm going to be learning just like you. So I might have like a fun joke here or there, or maybe I'll play some sound effects. Like the little,
there we go.
I don't know.
Hit us with some turkey gobbles every now and then.
Something like
just
that.
Just randomly.
But no. Aside from whatever, I'm kind of interested to learn a little bit about this. I have some general knowledge, but I expect to learn something. So I'm kind of sitting, listening with the listener.
Yeah, great. Well, November 11th, 1620, the Pilgrims get sight of land from the deck of the Mayflower. But really, the whole story of their journeys begins 100 years before they actually see the shores of what becomes the United States. And it really begins in the garden with Adam and Eve, but we don't have time for all that, so we'll fast forward to Henry VIII. Henry VIII is in a bit of a marriage crisis, if you will, 1527, and he is desiring, Henry VIII is the King of England at the time. Another important thing, this is not an important side, is a lot of times historically we think of England kind of in its glory days, its superpower days. England is not that at this time, and you will kind of see that they come into that. But at this time, with Henry VIII, there's lots of different political things going on, and amidst all of that, he is desiring an annulment from his wife, Catherine of Aragon. Now, Catherine of Aragon had not produced for Henry a son like he wanted, and as a surviving son, we'll say that. Henry then desired to get a divorce and remarry, and he desired to get a divorce on the grounds that his marriage was invalid because Catherine had been the wife of his brother, and then his brother passed away and he married her. And so to kind of get out of that marriage, he presents to the Pope, I decided that this isn't a good thing, and so I need to be out of this marriage. Well, now, Pope Clement VII, he refuses the annulment, okay? And he largely does this. So Pope Clement, if you ever want to feel bad for a pope, you can feel bad for a pope in this scenario. So he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. He has Henry pressing him for the annulment of this marriage, but also Catherine, her nephew, is Charles V, the king of the Holy Roman Empire. So you can't really scorn Catherine's family, who happens to be the king of the Holy Roman Empire, but also you need to try to make the King of England happy too. So this is really an opportunity for for the Pope to weigh out his options, because somebody is not going to be happy. So there's lots of political pressure. On top of that, there's religious pressure and everything else. Of course, that is indicative of this time period. When we think about the English Reformation, which is kind of this period, the English Reformation did not come around the way that the other Reformations did. So when we think about the German Reformation or the Swiss Reformation or any of those different things, these begin largely with doctrinal kind of things. And that it's the doctrine and it's the reading of God's word that spurs the Reformation. The English Reformation does not begin that way. It begins again with a desire for a divorce to take place. So Henry could not secure this papal annulment. The Pope denies it, and so he seeks another path. And the path that he chooses is, and this is taking a lot of events and throwing it all under one little tiny category. So again, for the historian listening, this will be extraordinarily frustrating. He decides, we're going to break off from Rome. So Henry declares royal supremacy, effectively making the Church of England. Now, the Church of England, in its form right now under Henry, basically is Catholic. But the Pope is no longer the head of the church. No, Henry makes himself the head. And so there's a whole series of declarations of royal supremacy where Henry covers all of his bases. So between 1532 and 1534, Henry and Parliament, they pass a series of acts that basically sever ties with Rome. And so the Act of Supremacy starts is given in 1534. So this declares the king as the supreme head of the Church of England. Okay. One of the things that will become a thorn in the side for the budding Protestants in that time is the title, the head of the church. That's going to come up again, because who is the head of the church?
Oh, I know that one.
Yeah, right. This is the Sunday school answer. me. It's Christ, right? And so even someone calling themselves the head of the church, it just smacks of things that you don't like. And so he declares himself the supreme head of the Church of England. Just before that, the Act of Restraint of Appeals is put into place. So this is 1533. And this states that England is a sovereign nation and is sovereign over its spiritual decisions, and that spiritual decisions, not only shouldn't they could not be appealed to Rome. So effectively, the Catholics, the practicing Catholics, and those who want to remain under kind of the headship of the Pope are not allowed to do so. There's no more appeals to be made to Rome. You need to be made directly to the king. Following that, to kind of secure it, the cherry on top, is the Treason Act in 1534. So the Treason Act makes it a crime to deny the king's religious authority, right? So if you don't like it, guess what? It's illegal now for you to not like it. So everybody better clap for Henry VIII. So this effectively, again, creates the Church of England under royal rule, not papal rule, under royal authority, not papal authority. Now, this is one of my favorite parts of this whole thing. Favorite because it's like fascinating to me, is that in all of this, there's this huge sweeping change that begins taking place. Obviously, if you're pulling away from Rome, Part of this, and this is just a small piece of the puzzle, is the dissolution of the monasteries. So between 1536 and 1541, there's all of these monastic lands across England. Now, they're technically owned by the royalty kind of England, but they're under papal rulership. And so when that relationship is cut off, what Henry does is he begins closing all of these monasteries across England. Now, what he does, and this is a little bit debated, I think it's an act of just pure political genius. Okay. How do you satisfy? I mean, how do you procure the support for such a major event as breaking off from Rome from all of the right people that you need support from? So in this time, it's not the populace, it's the wealthy. You need support from the wealthy. How do you do that? We've got all of these monastic lands. Henry starts putting for sale signs up on all the land. Not he himself, but probably some serf or something. All of these monastic lands begin going up for sale, and it just so happens that it's the nobles that are able, the ruling class, that now will be able to have a financial stake in the new church. Hey, if you don't like, if you may not like this separating from Rome, but look at all this land that just came up available for sale. And just that move procures for Henry vast amounts of support, and vast amounts of wealth begin flowing into the crown. So this is kind of like the rise, maybe not, this isn't the whole picture of it, but this is the kind of the rise of England's power, of this money just flowing into the crown. A couple of things that I think are interesting is that this whole movement kind of helped stabilize the break, and that there were people that benefited materially, and then they were motivated to support it. We see similar tactics in politics still. The monastic lands then equaled. So this is what blew my mind when I first read this. The monastic lands that went up for sale equaled 30% of the entirety of the land that was available in England and Wales. So 30% of your country is now up for sale. To kind of give you a USA equivalent, so not including Alaska, not including Hawaii, just mainland US, that would be like tomorrow, our president saying California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, Montana, and Wyoming are for sale. A massive, massive portion of land. Now, the church, doctrinally, so it's secured the funds that it needs and the support that it needs, and the church remains doctrinally Catholic for a while, just with the king as the head. Now, during this time, kind of proving the point that things are still remaining Catholic in practice, this is the time period that, like, William Tyndale is executed for translating the Bible into English. And of course, as history tells us, Tyndale's last words when he's being martyred, "Lord, open the eyes of the king," Henry dies. And the next up on the throne, again, so many events transpire between this, but we don't have time for all those things, is Edward VI. Now, Edward VI is so different from his father. In fact, one of the largest waves of Protestant reform that takes place under Edward VI. Here's the thing. When Edward takes the throne, he is 9 years old. He dies when he's 15. So he has a very short ruling time. Of course, he's got teams of advisors and all kinds of people behind him. These aren't just him making decisions all of his own. But the Church of England under Edward, so again, it's Catholic, essentially, But then under Edward, it becomes more Reformed and Protestant. So in 1549 is the first Book of Common Prayer. This replaces the Latin Mass with an English liturgy. So now the people in England can actually understand what's going on when they gather to worship. Communion is taken more in memorial language than in a sacrificial mass style. So these are not small changes, and they're significant and large changes that take place. In 1552, the second Book of Common Prayer is put out. This is a dramatic shift because this removes nearly every single traditional Catholic element from the service. It rejects any idea of Christ's bodily presence in the Eucharist, so that's done away with. It requires communion in both kinds, so the bread and the wine for everyone. It's not just for the priest. Other things, they remove the altar stone, candles, vestments. There was some allowance for some sort of vestments, but as far as being required and things like that, that wasn't there anymore. The sacramental language is removed immediately after that. So one of the things that you have to keep in mind here is when we're thinking about the shift from Rome to the Church of England, and then kind of the Catholic Church of England to now this Protestant Church of England, one of the things that leads up to the Pilgrims saying, we're out of here, is there is this absolute grinding of gears religiously. Again, from the time that that Henry breaks off from the Catholic Church, or from the Catholic Church, to the time that the Pilgrims land on the shores, is about 100 years. And so this is not a lot of time to adjust to these things. And this isn't all, because as Edward continues in 1553, they produce the 42 Articles. So this is explicitly Protestant and Reformed style theology. It denies transubstantiation. It asserts justification of by faith alone. It teaches predestination. It limits the number of the sacraments to how many, Jack? Guess.
Two.
Two. Just two. So the additional sacraments are removed. And then these articles later become the basis for the 39 articles under Elizabeth I.
Yeah. So an interesting point here is, and if you just a recommendation, Thomas Cranmer was kind of the brainchild behind a lot of the Book of Second Common Prayer and the 42 Articles. And he's a really interesting study. I know we don't have time to get into that today, but he is a really interesting guy. And if you're an Anglican or a fan of Anglicans, the 42 Articles are basically the bed or the foundation from which the Anglican Church. It's very different now, but the J.I. Packer version of Anglican would look back fondly on these.
Right. So do they use? So is that the 39 articles then?
Yeah. And eventually they boil it down to the 39 articles, but the 42 articles are part of the core doctrinal text of Anglicanism.
Right. Because it becomes the 39 articles under Elizabeth.
Yes.
First. So yeah. So there's all kinds of reforms taking place. Again, cannot stress enough, these are not small changes, okay? This isn't Edward coming in and saying, oh, we're going to install blue carpet instead of green, I mean, there's churches that split over such smaller things than this. So all these additional reforms, they're quoted as saying, that they're seeking to remove the, quote, popish practices, the veneration of images and relics, all of these things. Ordered the destruction of several statues and shrines and wall paintings. Did not see any, one of the things people argue, like, oh, well, the cultural significance, like they didn't even care about that. It's like, get this stuff out here. We don't want it. There was, they outlawed processions, holy water, So the holy water gig was done. The ashes, the palms, many of the saints' days and things like that uh, allowed clergy to marry. So that was a big one, which then is going to come back to bite those guys that get married later on. Required the clergy to preach regularly, which imagine that you would require your clergy to regularly be preaching. They removed the requirements again for the Catholic vestments. I think I said that already. Mandated English Bibles in the churches. Simplified the church's calendar drastically. So many who become what we know as the Puritans, they're taking kind of formation in this time period. This is the rise of the Puritans, I guess you could say. Here's the thing, though. Edward VI was a very sickly child to begin with. He dies at the young age of 15. Okay. They expected, and he expected, that his death was coming when he fell ill. And the fear was that in the line of succession, the next person that was in line was his half-sister, whose name was Mary. And Mary is the daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. Mary is a devout Catholic. You might know her as Bloody Mary. Edward tries his best before he dies to change the line of succession. And he does this by making his other half-sister, Lady Jane Grey, queen. She's only queen for 9 days. Mary raises an army. So once Edward dies, Mary raises an army, a lot of Catholic supporters that have kind of been waiting in the wings here, raises an army that supports the Tudor line, and Jane surrenders without a fight. Okay. So the political movement, for anybody who says that government can't be efficient, Mary raises an army in 9 days and makes it happen.
I was just going to say, we think about our political government being drastically bifurcated, like our political climate right now,
right?
How dynamic everything is. Our current political situation doesn't hold a candle what was happening.
Not even close. Not even close. Because we've gone full Catholic to like English Catholic to Protestant, and now we're about to violently be ripped back to Catholicism. And again, this is happening in like less than a decade. These windows of these kind of things happening. So if you want to talk about things that, again, like what Jack said, people talk about our country's being torn apart and things like that. And in some degree that is true. But this is something wholly other compared to, again, the political climate we have.
And so Mary, have Twitter.
Exactly. Mary's mean tweets. It's kind of fun to say.
Mary's mean tweets. I like it.
So Mary the First comes into power. She rules 1553 to 15. She restores Roman Catholicism. So everything basically that had been done, every inch of ground that had been gained was then undone. All of the Edwardian changes are flipped back over. And again, she's remembered as Bloody Mary because the scale of persecution that takes place under her. And in the first 3.5 years, about 280 Protestants are put to death.
So now, one of which, just to tie into what I said earlier, Thomas Cranmer, again, the brainchild behind the Book of Common Prayer and the 39 Articles. So he was very Protestant. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting story here, just to kind of, again, say this. So when Mary comes into the throne, targets him. He's one of the first people he goes after because he's like a leader of this movement. He's in prison, pressured, and he actually signs a recantation. Like basically, I recant everything that I said. And that goes on for a little bit, but conviction got the best of him. And he recanted his recantation.
Right. I was crossing my fingers. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And no, what he ended up happening, it's kind of a cool, like an interesting story. Like stuff like this just doesn't happen now. So he's going to be, because he recanted his recantation, he's going to be burned at the stake. So right before he's about to die, the hand that signed the initial, I'm going to go back to Catholic, he stuck that in the fire and let it be burned first. And then he was burned alive, which is, again, our political climate doesn't hold a candle to what was going on back then.
Right. Tons of stories like that. So a lot of the information that we have about the persecutions in this time is from Fox's Book of Martyrs. And so he writes extensively kind of on this period of persecution. Now, what's interesting is, you mentioned Kramer, and you would think that when persecution is going to come in, you're going to go for the bigwigs, of course. It seems like you need to silence the heads of the movements, and that's eventually why Lady Jane Grey is killed, because people are like, there's a Protestant army kind of forming, and naturally she would be their queen, and so Mary has her put to death just to kind of nip that in the bud. But what's unique, or maybe not unique, what's interesting about these deaths is, again, in 3.5 years, about 280 Protestants are put to death, but it's the nature of their deaths that makes this interesting. So, as Jack kind of mentioned already, these are public burnings. So people are being burnt alive in public. Okay, these 280. These are drawing huge crowds of people. Now, these stories that are kind of immortalized during this time, this persecution does not have the effect that Mary and others think that it's going to, because it wasn't just the leaders that are being killed. I mean, there's women that are burned at the stake. There's younger kids that are being burned at the stake. And these public burnings, and seeing the testimony, this is according to Fox, Fox's Book of Martyrs, not Fox News, the original Fox News. What happened is their testimony, singing in the flames, praying, going, with joy and steadfastness to their deaths, because they won't recant. Even the Catholics who are watching these events, it starts turning their stomach. And the persecution drastically tapers off, not because the Protestants had just decided we're not going to be Protestant anymore, but because the zeal for burning people alive wasn't there like it was originally. And so many Protestant leaders at this time, so this is kind of a whole nother area that you could get into in this study. And I hope that some of this kind of prods you to investigate these things deeper if you haven't. Many of the Protestant leaders in England during this persecution flee. And so they're fleeing to places like Geneva. They're fleeing to Strasbourg. They're fleeing to Zurich. So they're going to these places where they actually, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, become more radical. They become more radicalized in their Reformed theology, so that when eventually they come back, they are a worse monster to the Catholic crown than than they were before they left.
Like I'll just say John Knox, if you're familiar with him, listener. That's exactly his story. John Knox went to Geneva in 1554 and came back, and, well, if you know a little bit about Scottish history, he did some things in Scotland to really aid the Reformation. But just as a case in point.
Right. So they're sitting under, so a lot of these guys, they're sitting under these Reformed pastors. They're sitting under guys like Calvin. Their theology then coming out of kind of the Church of England and with the Edwardian reforms, now a lot of these guys are becoming explicitly Reformed, whereas they may have been a little wishy-washy going into things, some of them anyway. So again, the public executions don't accomplish what they want it to be. And this really paves the way for the reforms that Elizabeth I brings about when Mary dies. So Elizabeth I is the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, his second wife. He was a real lady killer. Okay. Mary dies childless at 42. Okay. The next successor, again, is her half sister, Elizabeth I. And Elizabeth I restores Protestantism, kind of. Okay. Now, if you look at, if you're like on the internet or whatever, and you see like a picture of a Church of England service, not maybe knowing all what to look for, all these things. Initially, when you look at it as a normal American Protestant, you would look at that and say that looks very Catholic. Well, there's a reason that it looks that an Anglican service, that a Church of England service looks very Catholic, and those things formed or took formation in Elizabeth I's restorations. So what Elizabeth essentially desires to do is that the country has been so whiplashed religiously and politically from these extreme swings, Catholic-ish, Protestant, back to Catholic again, that she reestablishes Protestantism with what is called the Elizabethan settlement. So, under the Elizabethan settlement, she becomes the supreme governor of the Church of England. So she's not the supreme head of the church, because that's Christ. She's the supreme governor of the Church of England. And what she does is she tries to stabilize the kingdom after these Edwardian swings and Mary's swing. The Church of England then becomes, and this is a simple oversimplification, but it becomes Protestant in doctrine and very Catholic in its structure and ceremonies. Okay. Protestant in doctrine, very Catholic in its structure and ceremonies. Under Elizabeth, there's a few acts of parliament that stand out. The Act of Supremacy in 1559, where she reestablishes the monarch again as the head of the Church of England, but she's not the head anymore. She's the supreme governor. She ended papal authority again in England, which had been reestablished under Mary. Required all clergy and officials to wear or to swear loyalty to the Queen. We should say also under Edward's change, where clergy could get married. So those clergy that did get married when Queen Mary, Bloody Mary, came on the throne and things came back the other way, all of those clergy who had gotten married were basically kicked out. They just weren't allowed to be anymore, because it was seen as just the ultimate betrayal, the ultimate failing, I guess, was a man of God getting married. So that was not okay, unforgivable. Then the Act of Uniformity in 1559, this made attendance at Anglican services mandatory. Again, Elizabeth is looking to unite the nation. And so there's a sense that you can be whatever you want to be in private, but you are required to gather. Whether you're Catholic, whether you're Protestant, whether you're Reformed, whether you're something else, everybody is required to attend Anglican services. This reintroduced at this time a modified version of Edward's Book of Common Prayer. Again, kind of blending Protestant doctrine with Catholic style, traditional kind of forms of worship. Along with this, if you decided that you were not going to gather at an Anglican service, then there were fines that were imposed if you refused to attend. Let's see what else. So there's all other kinds of things. The allowance of the vestment thing comes back up again. The preaching vestments, the clerical vestments, church ornaments. These things that were kind of allowed in Edward's reign became something that was written into the Ordinance rubric. The Puritans wanted only simple gowns. And so Elizabeth's bishops enforced a more ceremonial interpretation, keeping some of the popish-looking elements, like the candles and the surplices, which are like the like the lace kind of pattern things that go over on top of the rose. Yeah, Jack.
I was just going to say something that's incredible to me when you step back and think about this. So this is this act of uniformity that you're describing happened in 1559. It's only been 42 years since Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg.
Mm-hmm.
42 years, and think about all that has happened. And this is an entirely different country. This isn't Germany. This is England.
Right.
Like
right.
all of Europe is just, it's wild what's happening in this. And we're obviously focusing in because of the Thanksgiving thing, but I'm 42 years old. In my lifetime, right? Like it's just crazy to think that all of this happened. So many changes of power.
Right.
And that's, this is happening in various different ways across all of Europe. But anyway, it's just incredible to kind of think about the scope of the dynamic of change that's happened in a single lifetime.
Well, again, and when people describe it and historians describe it as a whiplash, that is what it is. I mean, it is there's such extreme changes so quickly. And it's not even like ripping a Band-Aid off. It's like ripping several Band-Aids off, and it just keeps, you reapply it and then you rip it off again, And so there's all these different things. So how are you supposed to operate? I mean, one day you're free to worship and things like that. And the next day you're not. Now you're required to go to these different services and you have to do these certain things. You were told that you could get married. Now you can't. So now you're out completely because you're married. So again, the tie, all of this is building to the Pilgrims saying, we want the primitive church. We want the church as it looked in the Bible. We want it removed from kings and queens and rulerships and governing authorities and the aristocracy and all of these different things. We want it completely removed from that. And you can see why. Like these weren't just, sometimes I think people look at the Pilgrims and they think, well, these guys are they're just so extreme. They are extreme to a degree because their convictions take them to, what we as, comfy Americans would consider, extreme, laying down your life for, religious freedom and things like that. But you can see what builds into this.
Yeah, look what they lived through.
Right. Like it's crazy. It's crazy. So the outcome of all of this. So Mary kind of meets her goals, where the church becomes core Protestant in its core beliefs. So rejection of the Pope, denied transubstantiation, emphasized justification by faith, but not as extreme as what you would find like in Geneva and what the Geneva reformers would expect. So you've got all of these guys coming back. Okay. So they've been basically in exile under Mary. They're coming back and they have seen the way that they want things to run. So when they come back, what they find under the Elizabethan settlement is really nobody's happy. The Catholics aren't really happy and the Protestants aren't really happy because it's just that middle ground kind of gig. But the goal is nevertheless achieved. There is a religious stability that enters in under Elizabeth that was not found in the previous three rulers. So she avoided kind of repeating Edward's radical Protestant reforms, also Mary's Catholic persecutions. And so she was able to kind of find a middle ground. In that then was the achievement, in essence, of national unity. It encouraged all the subjects to participate in the national church, even if they held private beliefs. There was moderation kind of entered in here. It created a compromise between the Catholics and the Protestants that no one was really happy with, but they could kind of go along with if it kept people from being burnt in the streets.
Yeah, I suspect people on both sides were like, can we just...
Right.
Like, just take a break. Like,
yeah. If we could just take a breather here, that would be great. So again, despite the opposition and support in combination from both sides, the settlement lasts completely through Elizabeth's reign. and this shapes England's religious identity for truly for centuries. Now, the next guy up on the throne, a little fella named King James. I don't know if you ever heard of him or not. You might know him as James VI of Scotland. Well, after Elizabeth dies, King James I, and he's already, again, as I mentioned, the King of Scotland. And so this is the first time that the Scottish crown and the English crown are kind of united in one. Under James, there was a very popular little book translated, the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
Now, yeah, right. now, of course, James didn't translate it himself. He put out a commission basically for that to be done. And his goal in that, or one of his goals in that, is to have a English Bible. What's interesting is that many of the Pilgrims rejected the King James Bible, and a lot of the Separatists, rather. And we'll kind of define our terms on that in a few moments. But they rejected that. They were like, we'll stick, they were like Geneva Bible onlyists, if it was good enough in Geneva, it was good enough for me. So 1603, King James comes on the throne. Now he tightens up some things. He has tighter control over the Puritans than Elizabeth had. James does uphold the Elizabethan settlement, but he opposes the Separatists, and he opposes the extreme Puritans who wanted to kind of break away from the Church of England. And he famously said to them, "No bishop, no king," which of course was emphasizing the link between the church structure and the royal authority. Now, some of the Puritan leaders at this time are imprisoned or silenced if they refuse to conform, so some persecution kind of starts coming back in. This is probably a good place to kind of define some terms. So there's the key players here, and there's kind of subgroups of each of these. The key players here really are the Puritans and the Separatists, like in the Protestant form of things. And if I understand it correctly, as just a down-home Baptist boy, what do I know? This maybe Jack could speak a little more for his heritage, his religious heritage here. I don't know. But the Puritans essentially said, let's remain at this time period. They essentially say, let's remain in the Church of England, and we will reform it over time. So over time, we will do away with some of the things in the Elizabethan settlement, and we will swing it more Protestant. It has worked before, and it can work again. The Separatists, however, they are saying, no, the Church of England is beyond repair. What we need to do is separate ourselves. So it's easy to kind of keep those terms straight. The Puritans wanted to purify the Church of England, and the Separatists wanted to be separate from them. The thing about the Puritans and the Separatists, though, is that all of the major doctrines and things that we would hold, they believe all the same things. I mean, they're all Calvinists. All of those things are in line. There was, as I understand it, from Bradford's a diary, which I was reading this last couple of weeks, that the main points of separation were truly this church structure and the reformation of the worship in the church, along with some points on infant baptism and some disagreements within that camp. But other than that, everything was very, very, very in line. They were in line with each other. Now, James's approach with Catholics was, at first he tolerated Catholics. So he tolerated them publicly. But then they faced heavier kind of restrictions. They couldn't hold public office at all. So if you were Catholic, you couldn't be in public office. There were heavy fines for you refusing to attend Anglican services. So even if you were Catholic, you still had to attend an Anglican service. And the heat really only got turned up against the Catholics, and they began being harshly punished after the gunpowder plot. in 1605. So when you think about Guy Fawkes, and that whole, those were Catholics that with an attempt, they were going to assassinate King James. And now the Guy Fawkes day is just like these grubby little basement dwellers that watched V for Vendetta. I don't even know, like, I don't know. It's Jack, are you muted?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the problem, folks, for the listeners. I can see Jack. He's rolling in laughter, wiping his eyes, can hardly catch his breath. But you don't see it because for some reason, Jack is muted. Can't show too much Baptist support, I guess.
That was pretty funny.
It's killing me. Oh. I've lost my place, Jack. Thanks a lot. Yes, the basement dwellers. Yeah, on Guy Fawkes Day. So the King James Bible, 1611, again, is commissioned by King James, translation of the Bible. And this is for use in the Church of England. So that everybody in the Church of England, all the different little gatherings, everybody will be using the same Bible. This unified was an attempt to unify Scripture across the kingdom, standardizing the worship, strengthening the Protestant identity, culturally and spiritually. Again, this is going to reinforce that Elizabethan kind of Protestant heritage, and so I mean, it's just good all the way around, at least in James's mind. The enforcement of the church practices, though, begins to be too much for the air quotes extremists to bear, because the authority of the bishops ensuring uniformity in worship is still there. He's limiting the Puritan attempts to reform services or to remove ceremonies. So every time they try to make a move to purify, it's kind of met with being shut down.
Hey, look, I just got a question, and I don't know if you know the answer, but
I don't
maybe
know if I can answer it, Jack. Yeah,
maybe if a listener has an answer, because we have Puritan paperbacks, right? Why don't we have Separatist paperbacks? Why is that not a thing, or is it?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I was laughing hard though. Wow.
Did they just not write? I'm kind of half serious. Like, did they just not write books? I don't know.
I mean, no, I think there were separatists that did write. I think that because I know this has been true of me, which isn't right, but using those terms interchangeably, of separatist, and because the only real place it's going to make a difference is talking about the structure of worship in the church. So, but if you're talking about, a justification, a Puritan and a Separatist are going to write the same exact way, on that subject, and so it would really only matter on the subject of church worship and structure.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So maybe we can look up, or maybe we can get that going, Jack, or start our own
business
company.
Let's go talk to our friends at Reformation Heritage.
Right. We have an idea for a competing company, and but we'd like some pointers. Yeah. So that brings up this question then. So in all of this, who are the Pilgrims? Again, there's distinctive groups kind of here. And as I mentioned already, we talk about the Pilgrims, but the Pilgrims are a specific group of separatists. Okay. The Pilgrims are the ones who make the pilgrimage from England to Holland, and then Holland over here. So when we think Pilgrims, we're thinking, United States, landing, what becomes the United States, landing the first Thanksgiving, Squanto, Mayflower, all of those different kinds of things. Again, the Puritans and Separatists, they're very much alike in many, many, many things. Now, there's a few events. This is kind of where the Pilgrims come on scene for us. And I don't know, maybe this would be better to pick up in the next episode. What do you think, Jack?
Is that a teaser?
I think so.
Okay.
So, I think these are getting released like nearly back to back, so it doesn't really matter. Flip over to episode 2, and we will see you over there. Happy Thanksgiving.